All right, folks, how you doing? So we're going to be doing Alexander the Great, Empire of the North, Part 1 this evening. Just waiting for Jed to show up, and then we'll get right into it. Hello.
How you doing, man?
Hi, good. I've hit the record button this time. I didn't forget this time.
I just thought I'd set the laptop up because it was a bit awkward the
Aye.
last time with the phone. Can try to read the
Aye.
slides with it was so small the writing. I've actually got quite good eyesight, but I'm struggling with the size of the writing, and I've just set up like a mic and fucking just something a wee bit more decent, like for sound quality.
No bother.
But
Well, this time,
I've got these weird ears that I can't really put like these like earphones. They didn't really stick in right. Can it? I just keep falling it.
That's awkward. All right. Well, this time the text is no as crammed in and all this sort of thing, and it's a bit easier to read. I did try to make a lot of improvements for the last time, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, well, is there anything that you want to say before we get into it, or do I just go straight for it?
No, well, for anybody watching, like these theories that Beaumont comes up with, it might sound crazy,
Yeah.
but you've got to understand that things like Shakespeare, there wasn't a such guy as Shakespeare. That was all Francis Bacon stuff, man. That was all his writings. Like Shakespeare, you know what I mean? It's like, and people just led on to believe certain things are true, and it's a bit like this as well. Again, this is similar, where something's been tampered with in history. Like all the Macbeth story, kind of like the story like the Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth, when you for the times it was just a propaganda piece. You know what I mean? When you look at Macbeth, like the Scottish king, he was a good king. Again, he was a good king, and he was apparently went to Rome and threw coins like seed to the poor and stuff like that. Like Macbeth was actually meant to be a good king. So this was all just propaganda pieces for the for the royals back then. So
Yeah.
I'm just making the point that it might sound a lot of this stuff might sound a bit outlandish, but you got to remember that there's a lot of stuff out there that people believe happened and it probably didn't happen. Even the stuff where like I don't want to offend any Christians, but like even Jesus, finding a historical Jesus. A lot of us go by Flavius Josephus, and his they found that the part that he done, Josephus, was like it was like a forgery. They reckon it was some guy called Eusebius that wrote it. So there's all these little holes everywhere, getting to prove if Jesus existed, and the best bit of evidence is from Josephus, and his evidence is shaky at best. And but people will believe that Jesus was a historical figure, whether you're a Christian or not. Can they believe it because they said so? Because Tacitus and Josephus. But you've got to remember, all their stuff was done years later.
Oh yeah.
60 years later, anyway. Well, they reckon that Josephus wrote about the so-called Jesus, but they even think that was a forgery. And it was like it wasn't even in context with anything. This page, I'll show you it sometime, but it's like it's meant to mention Jesus, like it's the first like mentioning Jesus in some kind of writing, the earliest mentions.
Interesting you should mention that, because there is a theory that Josephus and St. Paul were the same person, which would mean that St. Paul was actually Jesus' uncle. And then you got a recurring theme that the Prophet Muhammad of the Islamic faith was brought up by his uncle. Right. You see how there's this kind of repetition there.
Yeah.
When you put it together. Do I think that St. Paul and Josephus were the same person? I don't personally think that they were the same person. I think that's overreaching and oversimplifying, but the theory exists, you know. You know, and the thing with Beaumont is, especially with this book, The Great Deception, like I covered the last time, is it was really kind of rushed. And you'll be able to tell when we go through it, because there's so many holes with The Great Deception. But like I said, the guy, Beaumont, was 80 years old when he wrote it, and he was half blind. So you do have to remember that in
And
context.
and we were just talking about Josephus, Flavius Josephus, the famous Jewish writer
Mhm.
who existed between 30 and 100 AD, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, he is one of the best sources of the Macedonian shite.
Mhm.
Alexander and that, everyone falls back to his writings. And
Yeah.
if one of his writings is a forgery and could be bullshit, what about all this shit about Alexander going through Macedonia and through India and through fucking Egypt? And it could all be bullshit.
Could be.
It could be.
Yeah.
So, like I said before, you might hear some stuff coming up that sounds a bit outlandish, but
Yeah.
history is outlandish. You've just been sort of set in your mind to believe a certain thing.
I do personally believe that Josephus was the uncle of Jesus. I think that is actually true. That's covered a lot by Barry Dunford in his works, and that's all up on the shelf there. We will eventually get around to that. The whole Britain-Roman connections with Pontius Pilate, like we were saying, I think the last time. Even if you go into Edinburgh Castle and one of the regimental museums, they talk about one of the regiments there was the bodyguards of Pontius Pilate. And people
Well,
treat that as a joke.
I've been up at the tree,
Yeah,
the Fortingall Yew, and apparently Pilate was born under that tree. There's a plaque. There's a whole myth around Pilate being born there.
yeah.
Pontius Pilate being born under near that tree.
I, don't-
Uh,
uh, I went up there years ago as well. I mind when I explained it to my folks, to my family. I said, I'm going to go up to Fortingall in Perthshire. I said, why? What's there? I said, one of the oldest trees in the world. I think it's the oldest tree. And they go, you want to go up there and look at a fucking tree? There's trees in the fucking garden, But it's quite funny the way it was. They say that, but
that
you
tree's
don't
seen many
understand.
things, man. That tree's seen
Yeah.
many things.
It's
We'll
a
never know.
sacred tree. It's a
Aye.
sacred tree. There's fucking trees everywhere. You want to drive 5 fucking hours and go look at a
The
fucking
thing is,
tree?
I've got to admit, it isn't that impressive when you do see it for something so old because it has
Yeah.
been damaged and it's been like people have done stuff to it and it's been split in half by lightning and fucking all sorts. If you
Yeah.
go down to there's a place down the border, so there's another nice yew tree and it is nice. It's like a cathedral. When
Mhm.
you go inside it, the name is kind of lost. I've made a video on my channel about it,
Mhm.
but that is an impressive yew tree. You can see how that could be like nature's cathedral getting to preach because apparently John Knox preached. I think preached in one of these yew trees.
Yeah, talk about an interesting character, John Knox. We'll get to him later.
Hmm.
No, in this podcast, no, in this particular presentations, but I'm going to
But
get back to him at some point. Mm,
uh, about the last stream we done,
mm,
I was thinking about like this 300 battle.
yeah.
Again, well, if it wasn't these Greeks, who was it?
Apparently, it was, if I remember correctly, I'm going off memory here, so I might be wrong, but apparently it was actually Clan Campbell for the Spartans. Isn't that interesting? I think I might be wrong about that, though. I'd have to go back and look again. But yeah, so apparently the Spartans. I can't remember. I'm going off memory. Like I say, I might be off with that, but apparently I think it was Clan Campbell with the
Hmm.
Macedonians, if I remember correctly. I'll have to go back and have a look at that again. Um, but yeah, I mean the whole thing about them being trapped in the gorge and all this and the Devil's Staircase. I'm going to go into the whole Dumbarton Athens connection. That's a presentation I'm working on at the moment. Certainly go back to that, and now that you brought that up, I'll have a look into that a little bit more extensively as well in the future. Who were the actual Spartans?
Hmm. Cool,
I
right.
think it was Campbell, but yeah.
I suppose
Let's
that's
get
a
into
decent enough intro.
absolutely yeah. So Alexander the Great, Empire of the North, Part 1. True Human History and Ged Skeptic Media. So disclaimer, always have to go through this. I know it's tedious, but you don't want to get you know copyrighted and all this. So this is covered under fair use for criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and above all, research. So again, we're going into The Great Deception by Commons Beaumont. Not a particularly well written book, but as I have said before, when you put it into the context, he was a very old man at the time. So, yeah, do you want to start off or do you want me to do it?
Oh, you can do the honors.
Okay. So, Alexander of Macedonia. Of the period of Alexander, unhappily little survives in the way of authenticated ancient history relating to his remarkable career. It is an extraordinary fact that for over 300 years, until Arrian and Curtius wrote works purporting to describe his expeditions, nothing apparently was written of him. Both these men, highly distinguished, lived from about the middle of the 1st century AD to its end, and although the 7 books of Arrian remain fairly intact, of Curtius' 10 books, the first 2 are lost, and the remainder reveal considerable gaps or deletions of events, suggesting the work of a censor at a later date, as in very many other cases. Now, one thing I'd say before we comment on that is the audiobook there that I've put on the right hand side. I actually listened to that years ago on Audible, and it is actually a very, very good book. So, a very good audiobook. So, I recommend it. But a couple of things to point out with that passage. First of all, once again, Beaumont's habit of making fucking grand sweeping statements, and you have to take his word for it, and he's not backing it up at all.
Mm.
It's almost like, with Beaumont, it's really black and white. You either just completely believe him or you think he's completely full of shit. There's very little room for middle ground.
I think what it does is confuses you, so it makes
Yeah.
you in a sort of state of, you're in this weird state of confusion, like not you're sort of intrigued, but you're not believing it, but you're not believing it at the same time. It's you're sort of in
Yeah.
this limbo of like truth, like is this true? But then he hits you with certain things, and you look at certain things, you're, well, maybe there is parallels there, maybe there is holes in that original story. So that
Mhm.
keeps you sort of hanging on. He'll throw a little bit in here, and you're sort of hanging on. But you're right. The way he words stuff sometimes, it's like Jesus, man. Again, it's like to blow your own trumpet. Sometimes you blow our minds right now. So
Yeah, I think if Beaumont ever debated any serious academic, he'd be ripped apart. If he was to ever actually debate a serious academic, and thankfully this never actually happened, but I think if it ever did, he'd be torn to shreds because he never supports or backs up really anything very adequately. He did somewhat in the Britain books, Britain, the Key to World History, and the Riddle of Prehistoric Britain. He did to an extent, but by the time of the Great Deception, it's just
he
believe
seems
him
to
or
be
don't
one of
believe
these
him.
guys that has got like an overload of information that could hit you at once and just make you bamboozle you. So you
Yeah.
couldn't put him on the spot, couldn't question it. You'd have to go away and go through like, was that true? Was that because he's got so much he throws at you at one time? You're like, wow. Kind of like,
Mm.
then he moves on to the next thing, and it's like, kind of like it hits you all
Yeah.
these different theories, and it's like and by the end of it, you feel a wee bit exhausted. Like Jesus Christ, like
Yeah.
I'll need to think about this. Is this
Yeah,
true? Yeah.
it's like an info dump. It's just
Mm.
just throwing it all at you. Yeah, it really is. Anything else, or shall we go to the next one?
No, is it who is it? Curtius and Arian, is that the two people that wrote books about him?
Uh, yep. So this is how he starts off, talking about the two historians, Arian and Curtius. I'm not sure about Curtius, but like I say, the Arian audiobook I listened to about 10 years ago on Audible, and it was really, really good actually. Very well done.
Is
And
that what the picture is that you've got?
that's the picture there on the right. Arian on Audible. Recommend it. Like if you're really into Alexander the Great and into your ancient history, you want to go far wrong with that one. It's quite entertaining and well narrated. Okay, so yep, on you go.
Right. Visit to Jerusalem.
Yep.
I'll need to get used to speaking in the mic. Curtius must be suspected of having described movements or events which embarrassed later authorities. Arrian, for his part, wrote in colloquial style, imitating Xenophon, with the difference that Xenophon knew Cyrus personally, whereas Arrian was dependent on such records or extracts as he could collect and whose currency we cannot check. One might have supposed that Josephus, who covers a wide field, would have had something more to say of Alexander, who, previous to going to Babylon, had visited Jerusalem, where the high priests and elders met him in tremulation outside the city, when, to their surprise and relief, he venerated the high priest's mitre with the name of the deity inscribed in gold.
Yep. Well, go ahead.
Nah, man, Okay, why don't leave the slide up? Just leave that
Okay,
slide up. So, like,
sure.
so what's the picture on the right showing here?
So that picture on the right is Alexander bowing to one of the high priests, I would presume, because he's wearing a mitre.
Hmm.
Isn't it interesting? Because that's actually what the Pope wears, is the mitre, and now we have the Jewish high priest wearing the same thing. You know,
And
I
this
thought it was an
was,
interesting detail.
I was going to say, this was obviously, well, Alexander's times. It was 300. What was it? 300 BC or something like that. It was a BC
Yeah,
stuff.
323, I think.
Aye,
Yeah,
we're talking about the 300s BC.
yeah,
So, and that looks a very medieval picture, I suppose.
yeah. It does.
Because actually, got to remember too about these times. Like we can't even figure out what happened in like 500 years ago here. We're still trying to pick little bits of history in Britain, and we've got so much of here. We think we know something for the BC times, so sure. I mean, it's like,
Yeah. Well, the criticism I would have here is if you didn't, first of all, read Britain, the Key to World History, because The Great Deception really is very much a sequel to it, or The Riddle of Prehistoric Britain before that, you might be wondering, who the fuck is Xenophon? Or who's Cyrus? Unless you knew your Greek history. Again, Beaumont's making no effort to tell you who these people actually are.
mhm.
You could put maybe a sentence like Cyrus, who was the great emperor of Persia,
I
or
thought Xenophon was an alien.
I think, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the Alien for the Alien franchise. What's it called? A
A
Xeno,
xenomorph.
That's it. Xenophon. I was trying to think
Uh,
now. Xenophon was a figure from ancient Greek history. I think it was before Alexander. But yeah, unless you really knew your Greek history, then you're like, huh? You know,
aye.
who are these? But yeah, what you said about Josephus just seems to kind of sweep Alexander the Great under the rug for some reason. But yeah. Now, if you're looking at the revised geography of Beaumont, then, like I covered the last time, Inverness was Macedonia, that whole northern area. And if he's going down to Babylon, which according to Beaumont is York, then Edinburgh, Jerusalem, is right in the way. It's literally on the road down. That's the difference between the revised version and Beaumont's revised version, I should say, and the official version. Is in the official version, you're kind of scratching your head thinking, why did he even bother going to Jerusalem? Because he's kind of gone out of his way a little bit. Why would he care? But then when you look at Beaumont's version, it's directly on the route down the road. So that's the big difference.
So, who was it that went to Jerusalem? Were they talking about Alexander?
Yeah, Alexander went there.
So, who previous to going to Babylon had visited Jerusalem, where the high
Yeah,
priest and elders met him in tremulation outside the city. Venerate the high priest mitre within the right.
yeah. And there is connections, like in the city of Alexandria, for example. Later on, I've heard this. I think it was actually the audiobook in the previous slide. I heard it. A lot of the Jews of the city of Alexandria named their sons after Alexander the Great, because he went out of his way to go to Jerusalem and to pay tribute to the high priest and to pay them honors and treat them very well, the Jews within his population, within his empire. You have to wonder if Alexander the Great maybe had a spot of Jewish blood himself, especially given the fact that all the Jewish families are naming their sons Alexander. You know, you do have to wonder about that. I've often wondered if Alexander did have a little bit of Jewish blood in him through his mother, but there's no real proof of it.
But
It's
according to
speculation.
this, he's Scottish, mate.
Well, there you go. There's a whole other, you know. And when you go to, when you go into when Scotland was Jewish, the Sephardic Jewish families came in much later on through the Normans. Was there a Jewish presence in Scotland prior to, the what do you call it, the Inquisition in Spain, in Iberia, and when the Normans came over with William the Conqueror? I would say probably there was, but depends on how much you take Beaumont's version of events, because according to Beaumont, the Scots and the Jews are practically the same thing. But according to when Scotland was Jewish, the Jews came in later on through the Normans. So it's really pretty confusing when you're trying to track all this back. How far do you really go back? You know? But then again, you have to think to yourself, to try to answer the question, why would the Jews ever be interested in Scotland in the first place? Maybe they came from there originally and they were just going back through the Norman families. There is that possibility as well. Who knows? What do you think?
I think we've spoke a lot about this slide, man, and we should move on to the next slide. All right, it's
Good
a
idea.
photo one.
Hmm.
Is this Edinburgh? Is this both slides Edinburgh?
Yep. So I wanted to get it from both angles. On the left-hand side, you've got the Netherbow port. I'll try and blow it up a bit for folk who are watching it. You maybe need to expand it on YouTube if you're watching it later on. So the main entry, if Alexander was going in to the city, would be through the Netherbow port, which is where the John Knox house is. It's right there. And then
In the
going
High
up
Street.
going up the Royal Mile to the temple, which, according to Beaumont, St Giles Cathedral was Solomon's temple, or the Temple of Herod was built on where Solomon's temple used to be later on. And the statue of Alexander the Great in Bucephalus is in the city chambers right across from St Giles. So the statue of Alexander the Great was right across from where Solomon's temple used to be. If you're following Beaumont's line of logic, which again begs the question, did maybe Alexander the Great have a little bit of Jewish blood in him? Why is he so interested in paying tribute to the Jewish high priest and going to the temple? You have to wonder about that, you know.
Well,
And it's on both sides. Sorry, go ahead.
you've got to remember, like back in those days, like Macedonia, they were probably was the Khazarian Empire around that those times, or is that later? Is that later on?
The Khazarian Empire was a lot later than this.
Right.
I know what you're
That's
talking about,
that.
Scythia.
But that's the thing with people forget. Like Alexander the Great, man, that's like BC. That's like we're talking like thousands of years ago, like thousands of years ago, like 2,000 years ago,
Mhm.
and we can hardly figure out history for 500 years ago. Never mind 2,000. And
I'm listening.
I know, no, I'm just thinking, man. I'm just thinking. It's just it is. It's crazy how we think we know some older history than like new history, kind of like recent stuff. Again, we can't even get down to the bottom of like certain things
Yeah.
recently. Never mind like 2,000 years ago. So right, what's going on in the picture? You saying like Alexander came through John Knox's house?
Yeah, through the gatehouse. There was six entrances, six gatehouses into Edinburgh in medieval times, so there would have been a few back then as well. And the Netherbow port was probably like the largest and the grandest. So to make his grand entry, it would have probably been through the Netherbow port. Also, if he's coming down from Inverness, that would be the obvious entrance up to where St Giles is, the temple. Solomon's temple probably at that time, later on Herod's temple, and that is where the statue is. That's where Alexander the statue is, right across from St Giles. And the screenshot from the right hand side is just the other way around. You've got Bucephalus and Alexander the Great. And the funny thing is about that statue is it was originally in St Andrew's Square, and it was later moved up to the city chambers for some reason. The reason is unknown, as far as I'm aware. Maybe somebody knows the reason, but they actually moved the statue deliberately to just outside of St Giles.
Maybe because they were building that new St James Centre.
Uh,
They
or
moved a lot of
the
this. They moved a lot of mine. They've got the big bronze foot as well. That got moved
yeah,
away. Can
yeah,
used to sit outside the church, St Mary's Church,
hmm
right beside St James. There's a
right.
church. So they sort of shuffle these things around willy nilly, depending on
I
how
might
much they're
be
developing stuff.
I might be looking for meaning where none exists, but I just think it's pretty interesting. And also, when the Queen died last year, she was in St Giles for well, it wasn't quite 24 hours, but almost 24 hours, lay in state in St Giles, and you're thinking, what is so special about this church? If you think about the monarchy, would know their bloodline, they would know their history and their ancestry. And I think I said this last time as well, but you go to any of the castles like Stirling Castle or Edinburgh Castle or any of the castles, you look at, pay attention to the tapestry. It's all Greek myths and Greek and biblical legends and myths, and you're wondering, at least I did, why are Greek and biblical tapestries side by side? Because they're meant to be two completely different worlds, and yet you've got the Hellenic myths and the biblical Jewish myths, not only in the same building, but in the same room. And that to me is kind of circumstantial evidence. It's kind of thin, but still it is evidence. Perhaps you could argue that the biblical and Hellenic were much closer together than you might actually think they were.
I will.
You know,
Well, we already know that the kind of religions plagiarise over other religions, so we
yeah,
kind of understand that Christianity plagiarised a lot of the like kind of you would Jupiter, Mars, kind of all these sort of kind of planets, kind that's to do with kind of the Hellenistic
mm,
sort of belief systems. It's like Jupiter and Zeus, and but you can see it being plagiarised, kind of like with Christianity and they kind of even the Romans like to take aboard a lot of other religions and
yeah,
incorporate it into their sort of present beliefs, and so you see a bit
yeah,
of everything and every kind. You see a bit of everything everywhere, and oh, there's a parallel there. Can you? It doesn't matter if you're looking at the Quran or looking at the can. Uh, I've totally went blank with the Jewish book. What was it? Torah, the Torah, the
yeah,
Quran.
yeah.
Doesn't matter, man. You can see there's parallels all the way through book and like both of them, man.
And the Talmud as well. I think there's two versions of the Talmud. I think there's the Babylonian and there's the Jerusalem versions of the
Right.
Talmud. And isn't that interesting when you're talking about Edinburgh being Jerusalem and Babylon being York?
Hmm.
And I think you covered that years ago when you did Britain, the Key to World History, the history of the Jews in York.
Yep.
That's a whole other thing as well, but subject for another time. So, is Alexander's visit being remembered here with the? I'm going to move it back to this one. I think it's better that way because we're not covering the title. But yeah, I mean, like I say, just interesting of all places. There's actually an interesting story behind that statue. It's kind of not directly related, but this name of the sculptor was John Steele, who made the statue on the left-hand side of Bucephalus and Alexander the Great, and they agreed to pay the sculptor a certain amount of money, and then they reneged on how much they were going to pay him. So John Steele deliberately sabotaged the ear of Bucephalus, the horse, and that's where you get the expression "to make a pig's ear" or something, because they reneged on the amount of money they were supposed to pay him.
All right. I never knew
Um,
that, man.
yeah, just a
So what does it say there? They presented to the city by the subscribers.
yeah,
Was that
1884, I think.
1884?
Yeah,
Right, so it's been
it's
there a
uh,
while.
it's not a great picture, but you know, you're talking about Google here, and on the right hand side, you just have to wonder. I thought it was a very interesting image there. Obviously, St. Giles doesn't really look like that these days, but if Solomon's Temple and Herod's Temple later on were on that site, maybe this picture on the right hand side is Alexander actually in the temple itself, bowing before the priests and the holy men and all this sort of thing. I thought it was pretty interesting though. And all the paintings you see of Alexander, as you pointed out, they come from like medieval times, but all of them are very North European. At least that is the way it appears to me. They don't really make Alexander look like somebody who's from like the Mediterranean or the Middle Eastern area. It looks to be North European. And there was a theory I remember reading or hearing somewhere because I pick up information like a sponge. I pick it up from everywhere. I can't remember half the time where I learned all this stuff, but there was the idea that Alexander the Great had a lot of Nordic blood. That's why he was like blonde and blue eyed, and a lot of the Norsemen went down into the Mediterranean. And Alexander was descended from them, those who came from the Scandinavian regions who colonized the Hellenic world as we think of it today, Macedonia and Greece. They had the blonde hair and the blue eyes and all the rest. But then again, Beaumont's theory is a lot simpler. They just came from the north in the first place,
Hmm.
sort of thing. So, any thoughts on that, or shall we
Ah,
move
that's
on?
that's good enough, man.
Okay. So, whose turn is it? Yours or mine?
I think it could be me, mate.
Okay,
It
what do
could
you
be
got?
me. Yet Josephus dismissed his going to Babylon in a few words. All this is significant when we consider that Alexander overthrew the long held Persian domination of the ancient world and went as far east as India and as far south as to build the city of Alexandria. It constitutes a mystery that so famous a figure who, like his father Philip II, was a great patron of learning, was educated by Aristotle and surrounding himself with scholars, was yet apparently ignored and almost forgotten over 3 centuries. The explanation may be that his movements and conquests were too revealing for those whose object it was to prevent any geographical or historical description which might throw another light on the past and prejudice the aims they had in view.
Yeah, this is where it gets a little bit tricky with Beaumont because it almost comes across as being a bit paranoid, really. Like this was a deliberate conspiracy. I tend to be more of a believer in Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. I used to be very conspiracy minded, but as I get older, remember I'm 40 next year. As I get older, I tend to believe that the reality is mostly we're just a bunch of fuck ups. Not that there's this big conspiracy. Just things get kind of lost in the ether, kind of thing. I've become less paranoid as I get older. I tend to believe that there's actually nobody really in charge, behind the scenes or whatever. I'm kind of drifted away from the whole global conspiracy idea. Was there a conspiracy to, smudge over Alexander the Great's career? I tend to think probably not, but I'm still open to it. What do you think?
Well, if anything, they're making these conquests look amazing because it was undefeated and not kind of if this is untrue about where he was in the world really
Hmm.
and what conquests he achieved, he was undefeated in battle. So like
Yeah, never lost.
whoever is pushing this, and if it is a lie, it's not to downgrade the guy. If anything, it's somebody that's want to push or elevate Alexander the Great.
Hmm.
So
Well, go ahead.
so if it did, again, if it happened in Scotland, up in the mountains or whatever, it wouldn't seem as glamorous as conquering India. And it's whoever's wrote about Alexander obviously can like the guy again or was biased towards him. That's what they say, that it's not really good to go back and look at historians writing because they're writing they're writing about if you want to look at history in the past, you're better going to the ordinary person that is writing about stuff, can to see truth, can not know the historian that's writing the truth. Can that like you didn't if it is the truth, I'm saying the truth, but you're better going back to looking at normal people's accounts of history rather than the historian's account of history for the past.
Yeah.
If you get what I mean, because a
Oh
historian's
yeah.
always got some kind of agenda behind them, why they're writing that. Whereas just a normal person that's writing about that moment in time, again, they've not got any reason to lie or any agendas. So that's what I say, that you're better looking you're better not looking at historians if you want history. That's my
Yeah,
point.
really. Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah,
my point. That's what I'm
they're
trying to get out of here. God.
they're the original creators of the expression "my truth."
Hmm. That's why I find a lot of truth in like graveyards and gravestones, and it
Mm.
seems to me that it just that's the most truthful thing you're going to get there is death, and it's just like their name. Why would they lie about their names, Ken? So that you know their name, that must be their real name on the slot, Ken, gravestone, and you see the date. Why would they lie, Ken? So what you're seeing there, you're seeing a glimpse of the past, maybe a few hundred years ago, and it's true, Ken. It's true. It's sitting right in front of you. Why would they lie about it? You know what I
Mhm.
mean, like. So, and that's just a normal person. That's just an ordinary person in a graveyard. Ken, they've got an agenda or that. They're just in a graveyard. So, and you read
Yeah.
sometimes leave little inscriptions or what their trade was on their gravestones, and they've not got any agendas. You know what I mean, it's like
Yeah.
so. I find graveyards really good for like just having nice, like it might not be epic history, but it's like nice wee chunks of truth everywhere because again,
Little,
the,
yeah,
the
breadcrumbs,
aye, aye. But it's
guards.
just like normal people, again, the farmers and the people in the land that died in the areas. Again, and you read
Yeah.
their graves, you could read some of their gravestones, and some of them are really old. Again, I've came across like, and probably oldest is 1600s, like gravestones. But I've came across like hogback graves, and they're like older, and old grave slabs. Uh, and some of the messages and the stuff on them is pretty cool. You know what I mean? So
Lots of
that's where I like to get my little bits of truth. This stuff is so
yeah,
confusing. Can just blah blah
yeah,
blah 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 blah, and it's just
it is a bit.
that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's just simpler just going to a graveyard and reading some gravestones for 200 years ago and going, oh, and then it's like I said, it's so pure and it's just nice sort of truth history, and it's boring history. Can reading about someone that died that probably just a farmer in the area, but
Mm.
at least you can. It's kind of there's no agenda behind it. Anyway,
Well,
I'm going on a pure fucking rant about something
no, it's okay.
unrelated.
No, no, it's all good. One thing I would say though is when we get into kind of the Edinburgh Jerusalem stuff later on,
Hmm.
when we get into Beaumont's later chapters, what I think he's referring to here when he says somebody had a reason for covering all this up, I think he's referring to Constantine, Emperor Constantine, because this is a kind of a spoiler for a later presentation. But Beaumont's theory was that the whole of the Holy Land was artificially shifted to the Middle East by Emperor Constantine and created this kind of Disney version of Holy Land, essentially, with the help of his mother, Helena. That Constantine was kind of a mixture of Roman and Britain, and the Romans, especially Emperor Constantine, wanted to keep Britain sacred, sort of thing, and wanted to keep it as the garden paradise for the elite, and just send all the unwashed masses over to the Middle East, and they can have their wee Disneyland version of the Holy Land over there. So I think this is what he's referring to here, to a
Wasn't
large extent.
wasn't Constantine born in Britain? I'm sure it was his dad was Hadrian, wasn't he?
I can't remember.
And did he not get with like a British princess or queen or something
Yeah,
like that? And
I do remember his mother was British. I think he was actually born in York or had connections to York.
aye, I
So
think
that'll
that York
tie
has
in.
something to do with it.
Yeah, that'll tie into what comes later on, actually, in this presentation and in part two as well. The whole York Babylon connection kind of thing.
So
So
that's another thing that people forget, that
yeah,
just mainstream people, just the armchair fans of history, then they realise that these names like Constantine, they're probably half British. His mum's a
yeah,
British, and they're what? British, and
yeah,
so when you hear about the stories and the myths about maybe Pontius Pilate being born under a tree in Fortingall, maybe that's not so far fetched now.
no, I don't think it is
You
at
know what
all.
I mean? You know what I mean?
Well, it's certainly true that in many ways, Emperor Constantine was moving everything to the east, because then you had the Byzantine Empire that was created basically through him moving Constantinople, making that the capital over in the east. So there is some truth to the idea that Constantine the Emperor was moving, shifting everything over to the Mediterranean and the Middle East. But Beaumont really runs with that idea. He just says that the entire Holy Land was just basically taking the chessboard and tilting it the other way, and just everything was just moved over there artificially, and nobody's figured it out pretty much except for him.
No,
You know,
what I think Bowman's almost done is took the whole
yeah,
world and put it into this tiny space.
yeah,
Again, like he's almost like dragged all these countries from all around the world and squashed them, all these empires and all these
yeah,
people, and it's crushed them into a little space. And you're like, so right, instead of Syria, we've got Derby. So
yeah,
Derby in England's now Syria.
yeah,
Leicester was Libya, and
yeah.
then what? You've just squeezed the whole world into like kind of a
Yeah.
few hundred miles.
I will say this about Beaumont: by today's standards, he would absolutely be considered to be a bigot and a racist.
Really?
But oh, absolutely, some of the things he wrote, are you fucking kidding me? Never be accepted nowadays. But then again, this was a man who was alive, around about the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, when opinions, were different back then. They weren't like today, So you do kind of have to sift through some of his pretty obvious bigotry and racism at times. Thankfully, it doesn't really come up that often, but it does sometimes come up, and you're just like, oh, you can get away with saying that these days, Beaumont, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look into his work, but attitudes were different a few decades ago, 60, 70, 80 years ago. They were not the same as today. That's for sure. Uh, Anything else, or shall
And
we?
that kind of taints his work in a way because
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
he is talking about civilizations, different peoples, different races. If he's biased to one side, again, he's obviously he's going to say, "No, we were that. The ancient Egyptians. We were the ancient Egyptians. Oh, we will have that. Thank you." Okay, what would you
Hmm.
call it nowadays? A culture vulture.
Well,
It's
yeah,
somebody that just latches
pretty
onto
much.
other people's cultures. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
These
But
days you have to be yeah. These days you have to be so careful what you say as well. I mean, I was on the bus going into work the other day and sitting on the bottom floor, and there was a gentleman of a different skin color who was asking the driver a lot of questions, and this is like at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm freezing. And I'm kind of trying to get back to sleep because I was sleeping on the bus kind of thing. And I remember I just kind of grumbled on the bus because it was taking such a long time. He was asking this, asking this, asking this. I remember just kind of grumbled half under my breath, come on, sit down, you know, because it was freezing. And I remember there was another gentleman sitting in front of me who was of a different skin color, and he just kind of looked at me like, and I was like, mate, it's not because he's a different skin color, it's because it's bloody freezing, you know. It's like, hurry up, sit down, you know. But you do
so
have to be very careful
you
what you
were
say
about to
these
get
days.
jumped. You were about to get jumped on the bus, man.
It's because it was
You
absolutely
were about to
shattered,
get
and it was.
fucking robbed for two black guys, mate. They were
I
gonna
know,
fuck you up. They were gonna kick fuck at you.
I know, but it just
You're
kind of gave me
lucky.
a.
You're lucky. You shut your eyes and put your head down.
Yeah, it's just because the bloody door was open and it felt like it was going on forever. I was like, mate, just fuck it down. It's freezing, you know. What I mean?
You used the
It
N
was
word
the
on a man. You were like, "Hey, what's up, ninja?" You're
what's
like,
up,
"What's up,
neighbor?
ninja? What's up,
What's up,
ninja?
neighbor?
You wanna shut the door?"
Oh man, I was like, I was sitting there thinking I should have sat upstairs, but because it's freezing with the bloody door open. But anyway, let's
You
move
should
on
have
to the
said, "Were you
next.
born in a barn?" Aye, you probably were, eh?
Oh man, didn't say stuff like that, man. You can't say that. Listen, I'm the least racist person you ever met because I've lived all over the world. I know racism's ridiculous.
It's no, it's the thing is that people are just too fucking touchy nowadays, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We've all got jokes. There's no malice behind any of that, man.
I mean,
But
I've lived
you can't have
the
a
world
joke
over.
anymore about fuck all, man.
I remember one time I almost moved to Africa. Actually, there was a Spanish enclave
Fuck
in
that.
North Africa, and I was going to go there because it was quarter Jewish, quarter Muslim, quarter Christian, and quarter African. I thought this sounds like the coolest place in the
A
world.
whole lot of shithole.
No, actually, it looked like a nice place, but for
Where
some
was
reason I
it?
can't remember why. But
Where was
I
it?
can't remember. It was in like the
You
north
can't
of Africa.
remember.
I can't remember.
Oh,
This was like 9 years ago.
oh, the north of Africa.
Yeah, it was up in North Africa. It
Up
was
in
kind of
fucking.
no,
You
it was
got that
officially
shit
part of
on in
Spain. It was a
Morocco,
Spanish.
Tunisia, fucking.
No, it was part of Spain. It was
Oh,
like a
it's in
city,
Spain now. It's in Spain.
little.
Right, right.
No, it was in Africa. It was in the continent of Africa, but it was officially part of Spain. And it was quarter Muslim, quarter Jewish, quarter Christian, and quarter African. I thought this place is pretty cool, but for some reason it fell through. I can't remember why. But anyway, let's move to the next slide.
'Cause it's a shithole.
No,
Right.
it didn't look like a shithole. It looked all right, actually. So
Yeah.
Alexandria, the way that it's laid out, this is the city of Alexandria. Um, Pretty interesting. Now, when you think about it, it's kind of when you get to the map later on. I think this is why I put this in. You wonder how the hell Alexander actually ended up in Egypt, because according to the revised map, it doesn't directly go anywhere near there. And according to the mainstream version of history, Alexandria in Egypt makes perfect sense. But according to the Beaumont version, you're like, how did they end up there? It's a little bit puzzling. But like I said before, a lot of the Jewish population of Alexandria ended up calling their children Alexander. And again, you kind of have to question why that was, because it was a mixture of Hellenic and Jewish communities all in Alexandria up in the north, right there. And one of my favorite games was Assassin's Creed. What was it? The
So
one that was set
Alexandria,
Origins.
just for the viewers, is in Egypt, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Right.
It still
So,
exists. It's still around.
aye, right. I know, but my point is, like, if all this stuff that Commons Bowman says it happened, where's Alexandria in his head?
Well, that's a good point, because that reminds me of something. I'm going to use that thing that I learned the last time.
What was it? Egypt
Um,
was Egypt in France or something like that.
no, Egypt was actually in. Hang on a second. So, according to Beaumont, he said that Egypt was in Wales in the southwest of England, and Britain Decade of World History. Do you remember that?
Wales.
Yeah, but I think what he's actually again, this is where it gets really freaking confusing with Commons Beaumont, because I think when he says Egypt in this case, he actually means Egypt, Egypt. You know, I think that's what he means. But if we go on to here, I'll show you something. If you look at Helensburgh, does it come up?
Let's come up now, aye.
Yeah, there you go. Look at Helensburgh here in Scotland. Again, the word Helen. Well, Helen comes from Hellenic, meaning Greece. You know, the Hellenic world. You talk about the Hellenic world or the
Yep.
Hellenes. You're talking about the Greeks. If you look at Helensburgh, look at the grid system and the grid layout of the town. And one of the things about Helensburgh is there's actually an obelisk in Helensburgh. Interestingly enough, I can't remember exactly where it is. It's somewhere along the front, along the shoreline. So there you got a town in Scotland with an obelisk that's kind of grid shaped. Interestingly, hang on, what am I doing here?
Is there no a story behind the name? It is like it could be like a woman called Helen drowned in the coast, and that's why they named it Helensburgh.
Well, that could be one possible theory, certainly. But if we go back to here, look at the layout. It's fairly similar, isn't it?
But all cities were similar. If you look at New York, if you look at Amsterdam, if you look at it's all grid part. Okay, most cities are grid patterned. Edinburgh's different because it's that weird medieval sort of setup where we had the castle as a sort of centerpiece, and we kind of worked our way around that sort of centerpiece, and kind of we did when we started making the new town in Edinburgh. We started gridding it and doing better planning. Like, but most cities are like that, kind of gridded like that.
Yeah, the Georgian Newtown definitely in Edinburgh was. Yeah. Any more thoughts on
Oh,
that, or shall we?
The new town. Sorry, mate. I said the
Oh,
old
sorry.
town. The new
The
town. Aye,
the Georgian Newtown, yeah, and Glasgow as well.
aye.
Glasgow to a large extent was that way as well. Especially
So,
the merchant city right in the middle of Glasgow.
so that doesn't really surprise me that it's gridded, but obviously somebody called. Well, okay, where did the one in Egypt? What was Alexandria in Egypt called? If that isn't the real Alexandria, like what is that then?
Well, I think in this case it actually is the real Alexandria, and there's
Did
nothing
it
really
have a
more
name
to it.
before though? Did it have a name before? Because
No, it
surely
didn't exist. It didn't exist before Alexander came along. Alexander actually designed and built the city himself.
right.
If you're talking about the one in Egypt that we know of, that was all his brainchild, all his idea. And there were many Alexandrias, but that's the most famous one. And
And this was when? Was it 300 BC or something?
yeah, it's during his lifetime when he visited ancient Egypt. But like I say, when we get into the maps later on, we get into the geography, it becomes a bit confusing. You think, when did he actually go to Egypt and why? Because it's so far off everything else according to the new map. Beaumont's version of events, but just thought I'd bring that up.
Cool. I like the
So,
giant toilet roll on the right picture.
giant toilet roll.
Aye. See in the bottom right corner the
Oh,
picture.
right. I didn't even notice that, to tell you the truth.
Is that to wipe the
Uh,
giant's asses?
well, the thing about Alexander is he was one of the first multiculturalists. He did actually respect other people's cultures, not just the Jews when he went to Jerusalem, but he actually took the time to learn other people's cultures, and that royally pissed off his officer corps and his closest allies because he seemed to be treating the so-called barbarians as equals to the Greeks and the Macedonians, but Alexander was just didn't really seem to care what your background was. He wanted to include like the conquered races in his army, so he was so far ahead of his time in that way, and he was very inclusive and what you might call multicultural these days. A lot of historians give him a lot of props for that, but it really did not impress or please his officers because they almost felt like he was sidelining them. Like well, you guys are not above anyone else. You're not important anymore, and it really made them very paranoid. That was one of maybe the kind of flaws of Alexander's leadership, is that he didn't really do anything to put their minds at rest. He kind of fostered this. A lot. It's kind of like a lot of mafia dons. He fostered this spirit of kind of unrest and like vying for the boss's attention, the affections of the chief, kind of thing. So he created almost like this kind of toxic environment amongst his leadership, because they all felt like they had to impress him all the time, kind of thing. Otherwise, he's going to replace us with these Egyptians or these people that we conquered. He's just going to bring them in instead. So dying that young might have been a good reason for it. Because oftentimes when you foster this kind of competition amongst your officer class or your lieutenants, it can really bite you in the ass. That wouldn't be the first instance of that happening in history. Stalin did that a lot, by the way. Hitler as well, to an extent. No, I think Stalin was way worse, actually. Fostered a lot of infighting amongst his lieutenants and made them really jumpy and paranoid. I think actually Stalin was killed by Beria. He was poisoned. And they could have saved him because he had a stroke, but they knew that Stalin would never let any of them live now that they had all seen him piss himself. Face down on the carpet, pissed himself. Like, we cannot let him live, otherwise we're all going to be fucking dead. But that's subject for another time. So shall we go on to the next one?
Aye, and another thing I was going to say, man.
Okay.
Alexander, the name Alexander in Scotland is Alistair. It's Alistair, kind of like Alistair.
Okay.
That's the Scottish for Alexander. If you look up our king, Alexander, he was the last one, third. Alexander the Third. If you look up his name, it's like Alistair, Mac Malcolm or something like Malcolm or something like that. It's Alistair. You didn't have Alexander in Scotland. That name didn't exist. Back in their times, he wouldn't have been known as Alexander, like the king. It was Alistair in the Scottish language. Whether they spoke Scottish, though, fuck knows, but Alistair, that's Alexander.
Interesting. I didn't know that, by the way.
If a quick search, you could confirm. No, but you probably just take my word for it, but it's Alistair. Alistair.
I don't know, a few Alistairs. So I think it's my turn on this one. Alexander's great battles. So Alexander's first great battle was by the river Granicus in the Phrygia, which was Hanover, according to Beaumont. And from there he pursued Darius Codamanus into Asiatic Silesia, where he gained another overwhelming victory over the Persian, who fled, leaving his mother, wife, and children at Alexander's mercy. Stellar guy, this Darius, by the way. What a complete wimp. Some 2 years later, for the third time, they met in the plains of Gaugamela in Assyria, which is Saxony, according to Beaumont. And again, the Persian king fled. Alexander then visited Babylon, but not for long, as he set out again, this time into Media, which apparently was Hungary, in pursuit of Darius, whom he followed into Parthia, the Parthani and Alani, where Massagete, dwelling in the present Finland and North Russia, but once more Darius escaped him. What's your thoughts on that?
So, what is he just telling us what mainstream history says, and then just replacing the places with his version of what is?
Yeah, essentially. Though he's actually skipping an awful lot.
Where's Silesia? Where's that?
Now that is a fucking good question, because I haven't got a fucking clue. I think it's in Poland.
Right.
I think, because when I typed it into Google Earth, Google Maps, it came up as being over in, I believe, Poland. But there's multiple places that could actually be Silesia, according to Beaumont. Again, he's being fucking vague. This is the problem with Beaumont, is he never properly really explains it, especially in The Great Deception. It's just, I'll take my word for it. What's your proof? I'm right. That's my proof. And you're pulling your goddamn hair out because it's intriguing, like you say, and it's fascinating. But it's like, okay, can you back it up? What's your source? I just figured it out. You can tell, like I say, you can tell he was a journalist.
Aye.
He certainly got the hubris of one. But yeah, I mean, Darius Codomanus, it's a wonder he fucking lasted as long as he did. He outnumbered Alexander in all the battles and he got beat every single time. And he ran away and left his wife and his sister. I mean, talk about losing face. How are you expecting to hold on to an empire when you're running away every time you get your ass kicked and you're leaving your family members behind? And Alexander famously kind of almost adopted Darius's family into his own family. Like I said, another thing that kind of pissed off his officer corps is he treated these barbarians as equals. I say barbarians from the perspective of the Macedonians, and he vowed never to harm the wife or the children of Darius, and they looked after them very well. In fact, Darius's mother even turned against him and was basically like, "I wish Alexander was my son instead of Darius," But no bloody wonder. But yeah, I mean, this was something that also came up in Britain. The key to world history was that Syria, according to Beaumont, is actually Germany.
That's Saxony.
Yeah, because he said that Asia, and again, this will be controversial if you're hearing this for the first time, but he said Asia is not, according to him, was not Asia as we think of it today, but Asia came from the Asar men, and the Asar men were the Saxons. So actually, the proper name for Europe, according to Beaumont, is Asia. So when he talks about Asia, he's talking about Europe. I know this stuff will give you a fucking headache, but this is his theories.
So this paragraph's just telling you about Alexander chasing Darius through all the European countries.
Yeah, and we'll get to the map.
But
I
Darius
think that's the
escaped
next
him.
one. Yeah, 3 times. So what I find fascinating about the Battle of Gaugamela here, when you look at this painting and when you look at practically all the paintings, Gaugamela supposedly took place in the Kurdish areas of northern Iraq. Look at this painting. It doesn't fucking look like it, does it? In fact, if you look at this painting, this looks like it took place in Germany because you've got the mountains and all this in the background and you've got the green fields and all this. This does not look like northern Iraq. This does not look like the Kurdish areas of Iraq or anywhere in the Middle East. This looks like Europe. And you're thinking the people who were doing the paintings of Alexander the Great, even in medieval times, not know that this was all supposed to have taken place in the Middle East. And yet when you look at this could be any European battle in history. It doesn't look like a Middle Eastern battle. So when Beaumont again is saying, people had a motivation to cover this up, when you circle back to that point, were there people in medieval times who knew that all this took place in Europe and not, is it more of a modern invention that this all took place in the Middle East and Persia and Iran and Iraq and all this sort of thing? Because this is a European battle. Not just this, you can look up any.
Where's Guagamela? Did you say
Uh,
Iraq?
Gaugamela, yeah, Gaugamela. They don't actually even know. The mainstream historians speculate where the Battle of Gaugamela took place, but they don't know. They don't actually know for sure. They think one says it's here, one says it's here, one says it's here. Well, Beaumont's saying it took place in Germany. It was in Saxony in the south of Germany. And that makes a lot of sense because these were huge armies. I looked it up today. Alexander's Macedonian army in this battle was almost 50,000 strong. And the battle size, the battle force of Darius, the Persian king, was at least twice that, about 100,000 at the minimal. Some say it was 1,000,000. Well, how do you logistically support tens of thousands of men in the field if this is in the Kurdish areas of northern Iraq in the middle of the fucking desert?
Exaggerated, Ken, just to make the battle seem more.
Well, no doubt it's been exaggerated, sure, but the point I'm making is in terms of food, logistics, and all this sort of thing. If you were to interview anyone who's served in the Middle East in the British Armed Forces or the American Armed Forces, or anyone who serves in that area of the world, the desert, any of those Middle
Mate,
Eastern
they've got a
nations.
food stand. They've got the food stand in the middle of the fucking. Wow, look. See, they've got the
I think
gazebo set up. They're selling hot dogs. They're selling fucking shish kebabs.
I'd noticed that, but there we go.
Or they've pitched a
Uh,
tent or something there.
oh yeah, you
Someone's
would have
got
to.
someone's got a giant pink umbrella. Nah, it's
Yeah.
definitely like a kebab shop pitched up in the
Oh, there
middle.
you
They're
go.
like, we're going to make money here, man. There's tons of guys here. They'll be starving after marching all day miles. Alexander doesn't feed us right, man. We
Yeah,
can make a
we're
fucking bomb here.
we're
Get
tired of
some
drinking goat's
shekels.
milk.
Get some
Yeah,
shekels.
yeah, but you get my point though. It'd be a lot easier to feed an army in the middle of Europe, or what we think of as Europe nowadays, rather than the middle
Yep.
of the desert over in Iraq.
Yep, you could
You know,
sustain larger armies in Europe than
yeah,
in the desert, say the Middle East.
yeah.
Especially with
For
animals, the amount
longer,
of animals. If you got cavalry, can for
yeah.
water, can think about how much water you'd have to go through.
Just
Just
the
just
yeah,
water.
yeah. The sheer logistics of the Battle of Gaugamela taking place in the middle of the desert in northern Iraq was like, you think about it for 10 seconds. How the fuck did they feed them? How did
Aye,
they stop the animals from starving to death or dying of thirst? Let alone the men.
yep.
Makes a lot more sense that this was in Germany and the fertile regions of Saxony rather than the very infertile regions of the Middle East. You know. So, anything else, or shall we move to the next one?
What kind of tree is that in the background? Is that like a big oak tree or something?
Yeah, that's what I mean. This does not look like the fucking Middle East. I've been to Israel before. This does not look like the Middle East. I know what the Middle East looks like because I've been there. You know, it doesn't look like this. I can tell you that. I've been to Germany as well. This looks like a lot more like Germany than it does the Middle East. I can tell you that.
The color of the sky, kind of it kind of captures that European feeling. Can that
It
blue
does.
grey? Can
Yeah.
when you see pictures, usually the Middle East, it's usually bright yellow, can sunshine and blue skies, and can. But that's that picture there does make you feel like you're in Europe somewhere, with the dark blues and the greys and the dark greens. It makes you feel like you're looking at a European
Yeah.
scene.
I mean, the second I saw that painting, I thought, this is Germany. This is definitely Germany. That's what I thought the second I saw it. I thought, this is Germany. This is no way this is the Middle East. But anyway,
Maybe that's a German doner kebab
oh well,
shop in the middle of the.
Well, they do have them. They do have them.
Uh,
There's a few of them in Edinburgh. I see them all the time. So this is the revised map according to Commons Beaumont. Maybe work would be better if I shifted the screen slightly. Hang on a wee second. I'm not sure which. I don't know. We'll just go with that one. You're not missing anything with this layout, but there we go. So there's York over on the far left in Britain, Hanover, which apparently was Phrygia, the north, Saxony, where the Battle of Gaugamela took place, right in the middle of kind of the south middle-ish part of Germany. Silesia, again, I'm not 100% on that one, by the way, but according to Google Earth, that's where Silesia is, or Cilicia. Down in the bottom is Hungary, which was Media, according to him. And there's the Parthian land, Finland, and North Russia. And the Urals will come in later on. So the conquests of Alexander the Great, according to Beaumont's version, were twice or three times as enormous as they were, according to the official version of events, and nowhere even close to the Middle East, nowhere even near it. So it's a total revision, completely. Beaumont's just scrapped the official maps and just tossed them in the garbage and said, "Nah, this is where it really happened. It happened in Europe. Happened mostly in Central Europe, Central and Southern Europe, and then going up." And pretty interesting. By the way, a lot of well, maybe not a lot, but I know there were Russian czars who were named Alexander. And if you go to the city of Moscow, and I've been to Moscow, I lived there about 8 or 9 years ago. You've got the Alexander Gardens right outside the Kremlin. By the way, right there, right outside the walls of the Kremlin. You got the Alexander Gardens. Makes you think. Maybe this is just me reading into things a bit too much. I do tend to do that, admittedly, but anyway. What's your
Aye, man,
thoughts?
cool. No, like you never know, man. You never know. He has got some kind of path. I don't know how he goes all the way up to Finland there. It's then over. Where's that furthest east one?
The Urals, Ural
Underneath my
Mountains.
picture, the Urals.
Yeah, the Ural Mountains.
Yeah. So does Bowman even believe that he even went down to Egypt or into
Well, that's what I'm
India?
saying. How the fuck did he end up in Egypt? All of this is in Europe. This is all, in Britain or in Central and Southern Europe, and then going way up to Finland, and way across, conquering into Russia. And you think, first of all, when did he have the time? And second of all, how did he get there when it comes to Egypt? So is Beaumont saying that Alexandria was really somewhere else? Is he saying it's actually Helensburgh in Scotland?
We
I don't
would have
actually think
kicked
so,
his
but
arse. We would have kicked his arse. That's why he had to go to India, because he couldn't come to Britain and conquer
oh,
us, man. We'd
uh,
kick his arse.
well, there we go. But yeah, I tend to think the Alexandria that is in northern Egypt is the one that he's meaning. So yeah, I think it's your turn. And by the way, see what I was saying about the racism and the bigotry of Beaumont. This is where it's kind of coming into play,
All right.
certainly by
Well,
modern standards.
I better pull my breech up.
Okay.
All right. Well, who's this? The noble Catio Aria.
Yeah.
Right. After this, Alexander proceeded over the mountains. Urals.
Yep. The Urals that I've pointed out, right in the middle of Russia, that separate European Russia from Asian Russia.
You're starting to question yourself now. Urals.
Yeah. Oh
Right.
yeah.
Then
Questionable. Yeah.
reached Bactria, Turkestan, and finally crossed the Hindu Kush, whence he descended to the Indus. In
Yep.
India, he easily conquered and civilized the natives, who called the invaders the noble Katio Arya,
Hmm.
whence developed the Brahmin caste from intercourse with the Macedonian soldiery.
Hmm.
His return march is uncertain, but he ultimately reached Ekbatana or Egbertana, capital of Media, after 6 years' absence, and from there returned to Babylon. He had proclaimed Babylon the capital of the Macedonian Empire and had been there for some months when he died of pneumonia after an illness of 11 days caused by a chill contracted when bathing.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, again, this is Beaumont making these grand sweeping statements with pretty much no evidence whatsoever backing it up. Basically, what Beaumont is saying here, if you're reading into it, is he's saying that Alexander the Great and the Macedonian soldiery created the caste system in Hinduism. That's a hell of a loaded statement. It's that's a very loaded statement. Basically, he's implying, at least, or inferring that Alexander the Great created the Hindu religion. I'm like, what? You need a little bit more evidence than just saying it. You need to kind of back that up. You can't just put it in a sentence. It's like, oh yeah, and he created Hinduism. Moving on. Like, what? It's really not very adequately backed up at all here.
The
And
Brahmin
again,
caste.
yeah, the whole Brahmin caste system.
But isn't there a part in North India that believe that shit, man? Like in
Yeah,
mainstream history, in the mainstream, I'm sure there's like a bunch of like North Indians who believe they were like Greek fucking immigrants
yeah.
from the past.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, there is certainly a lingering influence in that area of India from the days of Alexander the Great. And again, it's saying here intercourse with the Macedonian soldiery. He doesn't actually blame Alexander directly for this, incidentally, if you're paying close attention to the wording.
It could be
He's
just
saying
the
that the
soldiers
Macedonians,
settled there or something. Stayed there
oh
for a
yeah,
few
they had
years, took a few wives.
Yeah, they did. They settled in these areas, and there were cities that were set up, and they set up colonies. That much is actually true, up to a point. But I don't think that Alexander the Great actually created a caste system. I think it was already there, and I certainly don't think that he was the founder of Hinduism. That seems to be absolutely ridiculous.
I never seen where it said he was founder of Hinduism. I never ever seen that in
No,
the
but
paragraph.
what I'm saying is Beaumont seems to be inferring this or implying that the whole caste system that you find in Hinduism historically was set up by the Macedonians. That seems to be what he's saying, or maybe I'm just how I'm
And
reading it.
does he believe that India was where India is right now,
Yeah,
or has he got it somewhere else?
no, he's as far as I can tell, he's got it where it is right now. But anyone who's studied like the life of Gandhi, for example, Mahatma Gandhi would know about the Hindu caste system and all that sort of thing. Because I think Gandhi was like on one of the lower levels in that whole system. But Beaumont is basically implying that maybe this is just how I read it, but he's saying that the invaders, the Macedonians, created the caste system in the Hindu religion. I'm like, no,
Possibly.
that's incredibly, it's an incredibly
How,
loaded statement.
why not? Why not? Why couldn't a group? It might have not been Macedonians. It might have not been Alexander, but you could. Why couldn't a foreign group come in from just say like another part of the world, obviously,
Mhm.
come into the north of India, conquer some land, take some
Yeah.
conquest, take some females, create their own sort of society, sort of um, individual sort of class system, kind of like compared to their surrounding neighbours, and then be defensive over it. Again, you can't get into this group. Again,
Mhm.
and that's kind of what a caste system is. It's like a tribe, kind of like tribalism, and
Well,
that could easily happen in North India. It's the northern
well,
part.
in the Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth presentations, I did one earlier today, 6.1. It's talking about the whole Nordic reptilian bloodlines. They went into various regions, like Sumer was one, Babylon was one, the Indus Valley was another one. That's what really actually created the Brahmin caste system was, the whole Nordic reptilian bloodlines, according to David Icke. Actually, nothing directly to do with Alexander the Great. That system was already there. But this is what I mean. This is the danger with Beaumont is he makes these big sweeping statements, and you can kind of read into them in multiple ways. You know,
But that's what I was saying before. It kind of confuses you because you
yeah.
on one page you're like, right, so we've got all these places in the world like Phrygia and Cilicia or whatever it is. Kind of we're moving through Europe here. Now we're in India. We're talking about caste systems. Like,
Yeah.
what happened there? Like, where did we suddenly teleport or fucking spawn? Like, what's
And
going on
actually,
here?
Beaumont has massively oversimplified this, where it says in India he easily conquered and civilized the natives. I mean, that is an extremely fucking racist statement, and it's not even accurate. The battles that Alexander the Great fought in India were absolutely fucking brutal, grueling. The Battle of what was it? The High Disparies River. He almost lost that battle at a number of points. It was an extremely tough battle. The Indians put up a hell of a fight, actually, and that's one of the reasons why the Macedonians wanted to turn around and go back. But Alexander was there for I think a number of years, certainly months. In the north of India, but it was an extremely hard fight. The Indians put up a hell of a resistance. And the whole idea that, it civilized the natives. I mean, what the fuck? Civilized them? What, they were uncivilized? If you look at the Hindu culture, the Indian culture, it's very sophisticated. Anyone who's been to India would tell you that, or anyone who's from India would tell you that. The whole idea that that was an uncivilized nation and the Macedonian white people came up and civilized. What the fuck? You never get away with saying that these days, and it's not even true anyway. But India has a very sophisticated civilization going back many thousands of years. So this is what I mean when I say that Beaumont does have a touch of the racist bigotry here, more than a touch, and it's not even completely accurate anyway. The noble Catuaria that's dealt with in Mars Atlantis and the Hollow Earth presentations as well. You know, um, but yeah, a lot of that is just Beaumont showing his personal prejudice is up to an extent here. So you have to kind of sift through all that, But anyway, anything else, or shall we?
No, we'll move on to the next slide, Dave. I probably could add more, but we'll move on, mate.
Yeah. So this is the kind of so this is Turkestan, Bactria, where he kind of crosses into India, and there's the Jhelum River, the Battle of Sorry, this is hard to read. Hydaspes, Hydaspes. I'm sorry, I can't properly pronounce it. But this is the kind of invasion route into the Far East. I wish it was a wee bit clearer, but you can only do so much when you're working with Google Earth, I'm afraid.
So what's the giant
Hydaspes.
body of water on the left-hand side of the picture?
What's it? I don't know. Geography was never my thing. I think that's the Caspian Sea.
Right.
I think, yeah. So this was the invasion of the east into the north of India, and look at that territory. Brutal stuff. You try to say easily conquer this area, easily.
No,
What?
I'm sure he lost like most of his army trying to cross was it the Ged desert?
Yeah.
I think it was called the Ged, believe it or not, Ged or something like that desert. There was a desert he had to go through it, and he practically lost all his guys. Fucking, he just go through it. I think he was advised not even do it, and he still just done it anyway because he wanted to kind of like go through the desert.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I know what you're referring to, but that never happened according to Beaumont's version because they were nowhere near it, because they never went through Iran as we think of it today. They were never anywhere near that country. If we go back a couple of slides here, so it's from Britain straight across to central southern Europe, up to the north, invasion of Russia, and then down through area like what is now Kazakhstan, Russia, the Russian steppes, through Turkestan, down into northern India. So he never went anywhere fucking near Iran, as we think of it today, according to Beaumont's version. He was never anywhere near it. He went actually around it. And as a result, he never went through that desert. And again, how the hell did he end up in Egypt then? The route is around it. It's right around the other side. Very confusing.
What about the old map of Britain by the Greek? Was it Phrygius or Phrygius or? But it shows you Britain kind of turned over on its side, kind of Ireland.
Yeah.
It's all. But if you look at that, man, and then the names of the places back then,
Yeah.
like Epirium, was it Epirium, something like that, or Epidum? In the
Mm.
Western Isles, if you look at some of these old maps, like the names of some of these places do look kind of like Greek names, or even the old tribes, kind of they call them the Parisi, the Iceni, kind like these sound like Italian, or can they sound?
That's right, yeah.
Can these tribe names? They don't sound very. I don't know, Celtic, but maybe they weren't Celtic. Maybe like Indo-European, early.
Well,
God knows anyway. But this picture doesn't really tell you much, man. It just shows you that the terrain's quite, and it's not very green
rough.
anyway.
Yeah,
It's a lot
rough.
of sand.
Really rough. Yep.
And
And as it says, he goes, so his return march is uncertain. He ultimately reached Ecbatana, or Egbertana, capital of Media, after 6 years' absence. So he was in India actually for a number of years. Maybe it was the case that he went back through Iran on the way back after India. Maybe went through that desert on the way back to what he calls Media. Because if we go back a couple of slides, Media is Hungary. Oh, sorry. There we go. Down at the bottom there, down at the very bottom of the map, where you see Hungary. So it would have went from there, from India, northern India, back to Hungary. So what's the return route? Did he go back the way he came through Russia and Kazakhstan and places like that, Central Eastern Europe, or did he go through Iran? Who knows? It's never explained. Beaumont never makes any attempt to tell us, according to his version. All we know is that he got back there somehow after 6 years. and declared Babylon the capital of the Macedonian Empire. See, a lot's just glazed over. It's these grand sweeping statements. It's all just, oh my God, that's the frustrating thing.
Where is the capital of the Macedonian Empire? What's the
Babylon.
capital is in Macedonia today?
I have no idea, to be honest.
I'll look it up, man. I'll look up the capital of Macedonia.
Okay. Well,
It's not
doing that,
Babylon anyway. We know that for a fact.
yeah, I'll be back in a wee minute. I'm just going to go to the bathroom. Back in a sec,
Right.
so I'll give you time to look that up.
Scope. The largest scope, spelled Skopje. See that, people? Scope. The capital and largest city is home to a quarter of the country's 1.83 million people. The majority of the residents are ethnic Macedonians, South Slavic people. Always had the impression that the Macedonians were kind of Greeks. So I'm trying to find this old map. Greek map of Britain. Ancient Greek map. That's Pythias. Pythias flourished 300 BC. Massalia, Gaul, navigator, geographer, astronomer, and the first Greek to visit and describe the British Isles and the Atlantic coast of Europe. And guess what? Pythias was French, even though it says he's Greek. He was born in France. I think Massalia is what Marseille is now. Let's see what here we go. We'll have a really quick look at the Wikipedia. Right. Pythias of Massalia was a Greek geographer. He actually was alive 320 to 306 BC. So that's about the time of Alexander.
All right.
And it's close. It's close here. Was a Greek geographer, explorer, and astronomer from the Greek colony of Massalia, modern day Marseille, France. So they're saying he's a Greek, but he was born in France. He made a voyage of exploration to northwestern Europe in about 325 BC, but his account of it, known widely in antiquity, has not survived and is now only known through the writings of others. Known for the earliest Greek voyage to Britain, the Baltic, and the Arctic Circle, for which there is a record, author Periplus. On his voyage, he circumnavigated and visited a considerable part of the British Isles. He was the first known scientific visitor to see and describe the Arctic, polar ice, and the Celtic and Germanic tribes. He is also the first person on record to describe the midnight sun, the theoretical existence of some northern phenomena that he described, such as frigid zone and temperate zones where the nights are very short in summer and the sun does not set. The summer solstice was already known. Similarly, reports of a country of perpetual snow and darkness, the country of the Hyperboreans, had reached the Mediterranean some centuries before. Pythias introduced the idea of a distant Thule to geographic imagination, and his account of the tides is the earliest known one that suggests the moon as their cause. And
Okay.
he was the earliest known dude to suggest that the moon caused the tides. Pretty cool.
Which it does.
It does, aye. But I think they've known that for a while, especially with like farming.
Mhm.
Can farming with the moon. When to plant stuff. Farmers, ancient farmers, depending on if it was a full moon, like a waning moon, there was different times of the year where they would plant stuff. And I think the moon was to do with kind of the pool of moisture in the air and shit like that. Anyway, I'm trying to find this map, the old Pythias one. You can take over again, mate. I'm just looking for something.
Okay, well, this is the Hindu Kush up front. This is the area that Alexander and his army would have had to cross in order to get into India in the first place, taken from the movie. Interesting how they actually got Irish actors in the movie of Alexander, made by what's his name, Oliver Stone. You know, he had Irish actors filling in for Greeks with Colin Farrell wearing that terrible blonde
Wig.
wig.
That was ridiculous, mate.
Yeah. But people watching that movie had to be thinking at the time, why the hell did he sound Irish? Why did he get Irish actors to play ancient Greeks? Well, maybe it would have been too on the nose if he'd got Scottish ones, I guess. But yeah, I mean, this doesn't do it justice how difficult those passes would have been to get over, you know, to get into northern India.
Wait, flick it to my camera, mate.
Okay, let's see. How do we do that?
Just press on me, present me.
Okay. Shit.
Ah, there we go, mate. Even that, but that's the map of Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Oh shit! By that.
There we go.
Jesus Christ. There we go.
I've seen that map before.
You see Ireland on the left, and you see the way Britain's sort of been. It looks like it's in the. Is it the Mambo where you go under the stick?
Yeah.
Can't remember.
It's looking a wee bit sideways, isn't it?
But see, if you look up near where the Isles are meant to be, and there's some crazy names of places that you didn't see anymore. And Thule, he was the first to mention Thule, in the distant island.
Interesting.
But it's quite a cool map to check out, and just check out all the place names on it and see if there's any parallels with the Greek stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if you look in the Western Isles, there is quite a few names there that you could. Anyway, right, what have you got up here? The Hindu Kush.
Yep, just to give you a quick visual representation of how difficult it would have been actually to get over those mountains. Quite incredible. What's all that in the background? Is that your phone? Do you hear it? It's like a wee interference. That doesn't matter. It's gone away now. So, of Chaldean birth. I forgot. Whose turn is it to read?
I don't know. I'll read it, man, if you want.
Oh, on you go.
Right, on his first visit, he received with the greatest demonstrations of enthusiasm by the populace, who thronged the walls, the streets, and the outside of Nebuchadnezzar's palace or castle. They strewed flowers, burnt frankincense, and loudly acclaimed him. The Chaldean and Babylonian magi met him, singing hymns of praise, and led him to the palace. Was he not of Chaldean birth himself as a Macedonian? Were not his religious beliefs those of the Babylonians, despite his tolerance? It was natural and proper that they should honour a prince of their own blood, who had completely overthrown the tyrannical Persian kings.
Oh, yeah, pretty interesting, isn't it? Again, some of the wording here you have to look at, like, huh? Not of Chaldean birth. Okay, first of all, what's a Chaldean? Second of all, where do they come from? What's their ethnicity and all the rest of it?
I think
So the
no,
Macedonians and the Babylonians are the same now, apparently.
and the Chaldeans were Mesopotamian
Hmm.
or Babylonian sort of area in Mesopotamia kind of thing. But I've got a thing where I think that these Chaldeans were the
Hmm.
Chaldee.
Yeah, they were.
Well, the Chaldee and the Chaldeans seem connected somehow. Whether they came here from there or whether we spread over there, for I don't know. But the Chaldeans from the Bible or for Mesopotamia seem to be connected to the Chaldee for Scotland or the Chaldean.
Yep,
When you see it,
definitely.
when you see it, and it's Caley kind of instead of Chaldee. When you see it in Chaldean, it looks more like the Chaldean,
Mm.
Chaldean, Chaldee. Oh, it's definitely you can see it in the name, man. You
Yeah,
see it in the name,
it's
and
all in the
you can
name,
see
exactly.
how the way the old ancient and the Celtic Christians, especially the monks, the priests, the way they sort of carried themselves seems similar to the way the Chaldeans in the Middle East were meant to have like carried themselves. There seems to be sort of parallels. I keep saying parallels because that's what he does through the whole book is put one place to another place, one character to another character. But aye, Chaldean is a Macedonian. Was he not of Chaldean birth himself as a Macedonian? So I take it as he's saying that if you're a Macedonian, you're just
Mhm.
automatically Chaldean.
Well, it's interesting when you kind of break it down a little bit. Chaldean or Chaldean, and then you get Caledonian, and then
Yep.
Macedonian. They're all kind of phonetically similar if you break it down and stretch it a bit.
Hmm.
Maybe it's like contradiction there in terms, but hopefully you know what I mean. But we're not
But
his
he's,
religious beliefs; those of Babylonians, despite his tolerance. I love that phrase, despite his tolerance.
I was going to say
Fucking hell.
that's that bit where he says, "Was he not of Chaldean birth himself as a Macedonian?" But that's like Chaldean was a priest class.
Mm,
It wasn't a place. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So,
But this only makes sense if you're taking Beaumont's word for it that he's right about the geography. Because, like I say, Inverness was Macedonia and Babylon was York. And there are connections between York and Scotland that go all the way back to before the creation of the Kingdom of Scotland and even the creation of the Kingdom of England. In fact, if I remember correctly, wasn't York once under the jurisdiction of the Scottish Church?
I
Or am I
think
pulling
so.
that out of my
No,
ass?
no. I think there's definitely heavy connections with Scotland and York,
Yeah.
and they go way back.
So is this kind of what he's getting at here? Again, vague as fucking mud. What he's actually trying to say here, you know? What? If he just took the time to explain what he means a bit more, it's like because he could mean like 10 different things, and you're not really quite
So
sure what.
this is him walking into Babylon. Is it this? He's walking into
Yeah,
Babylon.
yeah.
He's being like sort of celebrated. People are like, "Whoa!" They're popping party poppers or setting off fireworks. And like, yeah, it's fucking, it's the
Yeah.
Chaldean guy. Remember, you're Chaldean because you're born in Macedonia, so you're Chaldean. So, but
Mhm.
his religious tolerance. He was a natural and proper prince of their own blood.
Yep.
The tyrannical Persian kings.
Yeah. This all will come around, by the way, when we get to Odin's Thunder. The whole idea of the tyrannical Persians and the Parthians and who the Persians really were and all the rest of it. According to
Yeah.
Beaumont, I do have to asterisk that point. According to Beaumont,
Hmm.
because the Persian Empire, according to him, wasn't in Iran or anywhere even near it. It was actually in Central and Eastern Europe. But spoiling future presentations. Gone into that too much. But remember, you covered Nebuchadnezzar years ago with Britain, the key to world history. We'll
Hmm.
go back to all that again. Magi, magic, as we get the term, I think. The priest class, all this sort of thing. But yeah, some very again with the fucking loaded statements, and you're left kind of scratching your head. What does he? What does he mean? At least in my case, because that's the thing with Beaumont. He wasn't afraid to make very grandiose statements and just expecting you to fucking believe him just because he said it. Oh man.
So the populace are out in the streets and they're leading them into the palace. Is there not already a ruler here, or is it like I take it Babylon's fallen and that much dispute? It's like there's no one
Well,
even ruling the place. Is he just walking in here and just taking over? Like what's going on?
oh yeah, that's effectively what happened. They just walked right in because remember earlier on, Darius just fled. He just fucked right off, just abandoned his wife and his kids and everything. A complete fucking pussy, And he abandoned Babylon. He just didn't even try. If he tried to hold the city, he probably could have done it. This also seems to be implying that England was under, because again, if we're going with Beaumont's revised geography, that England had been conquered by Central and Eastern European force, presumably Germanic and Central European and all this sort of thing. Saying that Media was Hungary and the Mezzageti were Finnish and Russian. And this seems to be a thread through with Beaumont, that there were multiple invasions from Central and Eastern Europe into Britain that we never knew about. Again, this all goes back to Odin's Thunder. This is all going to be unpacked when we get to that. But yeah, the idea that England, Northern England had been invaded by these Central Eastern Europeans, and along came this prince from the north,
Oh, that was
almost
the
like this Jon
Saxons.
Snow
The
figure.
Saxons.
Yeah, Saxons. Yeah, and along comes, this northern prince from Scotland, from Inverness, who's liberated York, essentially, and kicked out the European hordes. The Germans and all this. It's rather it's rather puzzling, isn't it? But
I'd like to
this will
maybe
be unpacked.
maybe like to get a bit of paper and just try and get a big marker and just try and do some kind of spider chart just to fucking link everything up.
I know. This is why we have to do these presentations, to try and unpack it, because if we tried to work this out on our own, we'd go out of our heads. Oh dear. Anything else, or shall we go to the next one?
I'll just go into the next one, mate.
Okay, so the Chaldean and Babylonian Magi. Hang on, I'll move this out of the way so you can see it better. And presumably these would have been the same priests who were present for the birth of the Lord.
I was going to say it looks like the three wise men there, with
It
their
does, doesn't it? Yeah.
and they've got their Phrygian caps on. If I remember rightly, that's what they were called. The ones that look like Smurf hats, and the ones that I'm sure they're Phrygian.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to put up not really much to say about it, just wanted to put up the visual representation. And notice, by the way, that they're following a star. That's the Ishtar up on it's the left-hand side picture, but it's up in the right-hand corner. The 8-pointed star. When you
It
start
looks
getting
like
into,
the sun that's been drawn on later
well,
with a
maybe, yeah.
Sharpie.
The 8-pointed star goes into ancient symbolism and mythology a lot and all this sort of thing. Following the star, the Jesus narrative, they follow the star to the birth of the Savior and all the rest of it. Yeah, pretty interesting. When you go into the old cults and the old religions and all that sort of thing.
What's
A
the
lot of these
picture on the
stories
right?
get
Is it a
recycled.
dude on a boat or something? What's going on there?
Not quite sure.
Or is he just holding a wheel?
Yeah, it seems. Yeah, that wheel, by the way, I think that's one of the symbols of Buddhism. By the way,
Well,
um,
India, I know that India use it in their flag and stuff, and it's quite important. Indian, the wheel,
yeah.
the wheel.
The one thing I love about Hinduism and Buddhism, particularly, is they're untainted by any outside interference, because they were only discovered like several centuries ago. And when you get into the works of Colonel Waddell, L.A. Waddell, India is one place I'd love to go to, by the way. Absolutely love to go to India. The trouble is, being of northern blood, I'd have to go when it's really cold, because that would still be really hot for
Aye.
me. I mind years ago, when I graduated uni, I went and had a dinner with all my Indian mates, and I was eating their curry, and I was sweating absolute bullets, and they were all laughing at me, because this was normal for them, and I'm sweating like I just came out the shower. you know. I've never been to India, but I'd love to go. Fond memories indeed. But yeah, that symbol, that like the wheel with the spoke and all that sort of thing. Yeah, but like when you go into like the works of Colonel Waddell, when he translated from the Sanskrit, the Hindu and the Buddhist texts, and they're completely untainted, untouched by any kind of like Vatican influence or anything like that. So that was just a straight translation. You know, nobody, no kings or emperors or popes got their hands on them, their grubby little hands, and changed the meaning or anything like that to suit their agenda. So I'd say Hindu and Buddhist texts are invaluable in terms of mythology and studying the mysteries of the past, especially through the works of Colonel Waddell.
Cool.
So yeah, I guess we'll move to the next one. So rebuilding Babylon. So Alexander decided to rebuild Babylon. He was disgusted with the ruined state in which he found it, with walls broken down, the accumulated rubbish from the immense Temple of Bel lying yet, and an enormous breach in the river which needed to be restored to its former channel. He issued orders for 10,000 men to clear the rubbish from the Temple of Bel and another 10,000 to restore the river to its former channel. How much of this was completed is not known. On his return from India, the Chaldean priests met Alexander outside the gates and ordered him not to enter the city except by the east gate, probably owing to some astrological prediction.
So he wasn't allowed to go in. That's no unusual. Like some cultures believe you shouldn't sleep with your feet towards the door because that's how
Mm.
you go out. When you die, you go out feet first at the door. So you never face the door when you sleep. So it might be an old superstition where, and then they come into the gate when it's a full moon on this side. You're better going on the east. That's where the sun comes up. So you come on this side, and the sun sets on this side. So you go out that side. So,
Yeah. I guess what we call today feng shui, almost.
aye, aye.
Um, and in Victorian and Georgian times, people used to sleep sitting upright, and they used to sleep with their arms folded across their chest. They would never lie down because lying down was an invitation to the Reaper.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you were lying flat, it's like saying, "I'm ready to die," because you only lie flat when you're dead.
Aye.
That was the superstition in those days. But yeah, so you don't get this in the movie, Alexander, and you don't get this in the normal depictions that Babylon was fucked up and needed to be restored. And
But
so
was this
Alexander's trying
after
to
the
restore it.
fall? Was this after the fall of the Babylon? Kind of in the stories, kind of like how Babylon was a great empire and then it sort of collapsed. Is this him coming back in and rebuilding the after that collapse?
Well, presumably because he's been away for about 6 or 7 years, according to the earlier slides, he's not been in Babylon for years and years and years. So whoever was running the city had mumped it up basically and not been looking after the place at all. Probably the resources of the empire were overstretched at this point, so
Saddam
he's having to
Hussein.
go back and restore all this. Saddam Hussein, what about him?
It was him. He fucked it
It
up.
was him.
Fuck it, I'm just going to be like Thomas Bowman and just throw fucking in and Saddam Hussein.
Well, Alexander came back to fuck up Saddam Hussein. Okay. But again, according to Beaumont, this was actually in York. So I've only been to York, I think, once or twice. I quite enjoyed it. I quite like York. Down there, but you can see how York in England could end up in this state. But the magnificent city of Babylon and Iraq, a bit more of a stretch. But the idea of an English city with buildings falling into ruin, it's not really much of a stretch, is it? You know?
Aye.
Um, yeah. Anything else, or shall we
No,
head to the next one?
I'm just getting they're fanboying with this sort of. He's getting a bit carried away with himself now. And it's like, oh,
Yeah,
10,000 men to clean up the rubbish.
yeah. I'll tell you what, most English cities, most British cities could do with 10,000 men out there every single day trying to clean up the rubbish. That would be actually a very good idea. We
Okay.
could take a page of Alexander's book on that one.
Yep.
And 10,000 men to restore the river to its former channel. At this point, I'll come back to when we get into the further slides.
What river was that?
Exactly. That's a very good point because when we get to not this next one, but the next few slides after this one, we'll redress that point. But anyway, let's head to this one. I think it's your turn.
Is it me?
Yeah.
All we know from the vestige of its history at this time is that it had a harbour with ships,
In
and
Babylon. Sorry.
shipbuilding in the yards very accountable as relating to the alleged Babylon in Iraq. Sorry, what was that, mate?
No. Sorry. On you go.
One curious piece of information has come down to us. Given the names of various embassies sent to Alexander when at Babylon to invoke his favour, they were European Scythians, Scots from the Perth area, Celtic and Iberian tribes, Cimmerians, Ethiopia, Mull, Carthage, Waterford region in Southern Ireland. I've just been to Ethiopia. I was there for a weekend. Ethiopia was nice. The Ethiopian people were really nice to talk to. The Ethiopian ferry. Anyway, aye. Carthage, Waterford region in Southern Ireland. Libya is Leinster in Ireland, maybe because they both begin with L. Brute, Alaba, or Albania, Stirling in southwest Scotland. Lusania, a branch of Brute, Rennie, Lancashire. Delphi, Ben Cruachan, Argyll. Ellis, Lismore Island, mouth of Lynn. Corinth, Crinan, head of Cantar, Argyll. And Epidaurus, South Argyll.
Yeah.
And like I
So
said, that name Epidaurus, it reminds me of a name that I seen on that old map that I was talking about earlier. That first, like the old Greek, which was French, but Greek map.
mm.
It's got names like that, like Epidaurus. So, what do we take for this one, mate?
When we get to part 2, this will come back into play again because I kind of made this kind of the splitting off point between parts 1 and 2. And in part 2, I'll go through all these areas and I'll show the images of all these parts of Britain and Ireland. But in this part here, I've got the map here with all the little pins in it, showing where all these things are to really kind of put it into perspective, where Waterford is, where Leinster is, where York is. And like you said earlier on, absolutely spot on. He's taken all these things, Beaumont, from all this vast area in the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and just compressed them. No, they're all in Britain, and here's where they all are. So Inverness, Macedonia, for example, Mull, Ethiopia, Lismore Island is Ellis, Ben Cruachan is Delphi, all the rest, and it really is very compressed into this small little island, and the one next door, Ireland. But yeah, it's certainly a very bold move by Beaumont,
Yeah.
and he's saying here very unaccountable as relating to the alleged Babylon in Iraq. We'll certainly get to that point. And the thing about Babylon having a harbor with ships, well, how the fuck does that work if it's in the middle of the fucking desert? That's the thing about Babylon. It's actually nobody actually knows where it is for sure. People will say that it's here or it's here or it's here. All we know is roughly it's somewhere in Iraq, and I'll get to that point when we get to the next couple of slides. But if you look at York, there is clearly a river that flows right through.
Yep.
And there's clearly harbors because it's near to the coast, near to the English coast. It's not exactly on it, but it's quite close. So this really punctuates the point of how confusing it is to try and find Babylon, because this is all taken from Google Earth, and I didn't leave anything out. When you type in Babylon in Google Earth, this is everything that comes up. See all these different pinpoints. It's right here on the left-hand side. It's here. No, it's here. And then there's this one here. Then there's that one up there that's like 50 miles north. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the two other sides. So that everything you see there on the screen is all the results of when you type in Babylon in Google Earth.
Well, it's
The
got to
truth.
be on
Yeah.
a river anyway. If Alexander's sending 10,000 men to clean the river,
Yeah.
I mean, or what was it? Fix the embankments or some shit like that. What was it? But it must be a substantial river. Can it be just enormous breach in the river? So was it
Yeah.
like a dam?
Yeah. And then
restored its former channel.
yeah. Then you
So it,
look at
it must have been a big river.
yeah, and then you look at the results on Google Earth, and where the fuck is the river?
I think what's that winding into, like the Balkan,
Yeah,
kind of the photograph on the left. You've got
yeah,
the you've got your markers sort of in the middle at the top, but you've got sort of that
yeah,
green line that's swirling in. That could be
yeah,
a river there.
yeah. That's only way up at the top, and there's a Babylonian garden. And we're not sure which of these is actually meant to be Babylon. Nobody knows. That's the point I was making with including everything. They just threw it all in.
Yep.
This is the results from Google Earth, and then you've got the image on the right hand side, and you've got the reality on the left hand side. Up on the top left hand side, that's the Temple of Bel. That's what comes up in the results when you type it in. The Temple of Bel, right in the middle of a desert. And then down on the bottom left hand side, you've got what's speculated to be ancient Babylon, the old ruins. It doesn't really look like a massive city, though. It just looks like kind of a small community or a small town. And off in the distance, you can kind of see the course of a river, but it's not like a big river. It's like a stream. It's almost like a burn almost going past it. And when you go back to these results on Google Earth, again, I know broken record, but nobody actually knows where the fuck Babylon was, and they're just guessing. And there's the on the top side on the left hand side, the Temple of Bel, right in the middle of a desert, and then you got this little town on the bottom left hand side. Then you got the image, you know, of Babylon on the right hand side with the Temple of Bel. You get the same thing in the movie. And then on the bottom right hand side, you got the river going past it. But they can't even agree on that. If you look at, there's differences between the two images on the right hand side. According to the top right, the Temple of Bel is a wee bit further away from the channeled river, and then on the bottom right, it's right next to it. So it's just an artist's conception.
Yep.
They don't actually know. They're just guessing. They're just reading the accounts and just kind of trying to fill the blanks in a little bit here.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, like, well, just like you said, although Beaumont might be grasping at straws sometimes, I think modern historians, mainstream historians, are grasping too when they think they know just because there's a temple of Bel in a desert somewhere that suddenly that could be Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
So, aye, it's
Well, there were temples of Bel everywhere, all over the world,
mm-hmm,
even Belfast in
mm-hmm,
Northern Ireland. Well, what's the first part of that? Belfast.
mm-hmm.
You know,
Belarus,
yeah,
Belgium.
Belarus. There you go. There's towns, there's cities, there's temples all over the world to the ancient deity Bel or Baal. There's conspiracy theories that secret societies worship Baal and all the rest of it. I would take that with a massive pinch of salt. Um, a lot of these theories float around all over the place. But it is undeniable that there were temples to Baal or Bel, because that was one of the ancient gods that he's mentioned in the Bible. The priests of Baal were defeated by, was it Isaiah, I think, on Mount Carmel. It's quite a famous biblical episode
We
from
still
the Old
celebrate
Testament.
Beltane here in Scotland, here
Yep,
in
up
Ireland.
on Carlton Hill.
Yep.
Yep, that's true. Anything further to add?
Nah, man. Next.
Okay, so this is York by stark contrast. Just a reminder, this is Babylon, according to mainstream history. A very prosperous city where they don't know where the fuck it is. They're grasping at straws. And here is York in England, which clearly has a river going right the way through it,
Mm-hmm.
right in the middle of it. This is an aerial photograph of York. So when Beaumont is talking about the 10,000 soldiers to correct the course of the river, at least York actually has a river. You can
I know,
clearly
but
see it.
most settlements do have like a water source close by. If you look at
Yeah.
most again, towns, cities, whatever it is, you'll probably find a river close by. If they started as a little settlement, the people gravitate towards the water, and it kind of builds the same with coastal areas and stuff like that. So you will find in most towns and cities a river. It's actually more unusual not to see like a water source, like a fresh water source, because rivers are usually fresh water
Mhm.
rather than seawater. So it's
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
of course.
it's always good to be close to a river. And you never know, man. Like these ones, because remember we're talking 300 BC.
Yeah,
In Babylon, you never know what the climate could have been like. The river courses can change and evaporate, and so. But
yeah,
York looks nice and green, man. Looks
yeah.
nice
Very
and green.
fertile. Can support a large population. It's on the trading route on the river there. Because all trading, even to this day, is done by sea or it's done by
Hmm.
water, rivers, things like that. Even to this very day, that's the case. Shipping lanes are worth their weight in gold, and it does look like a prosperous town. And when we get to the next slide, you'll see this is what York looks like by comparison to what Babylon looks like. Very, very different. And York is quite ancient, and it's kind of a mixture of like modern and medieval uh, paintings and things like that that I went for in this particular case. But look how imposing York looks. It looks very strong, and it was the capital of the north of England. A fortified town. It looks imposing. It looks like it could be like the center of an empire, or you know, it has that look to it. If you get what I mean, what I'm trying to say.
Oh, definitely. It was like the ancient capital of Britain in a way.
Yeah,
I mean, because it was right in the middle. I suppose all the and everyone could meet in in York. But it's one place I still want to go to.
yeah,
Go to the is it the cathedral or what was it called? That building there at the bottom right.
yeah. Is that St. Paul's Cathedral? I think. Yeah.
Is it?
Or am I thinking of London? Yeah.
London St Paul with a big dome. That's York. I'm sure it's called York Cathedral or some shit or York something. But it's meant to
And
be one of the biggest. It's huge. It's massive, mate. That building
oh
is
yeah,
It's mental. The pictures didn't really do it justice how big that is.
I know it's very imposing and grand, and yeah, I love York. I was there years and years and years ago. But yeah, if you were to say which of these two looks like a very
Hmm.
imposing, powerful city, a capital of an empire, which one do you think, Jimmy?
And they've still got walls. Some of the old walls still remain in York as well, kind of
Oh yeah,
outside the town as well. So, I'd like to see that place sometime.
yeah, and yeah, just one more
So
set
some,
of pictures. The old medieval wall surrounding York, like you say,
yeah,
Clifford's Tower on the top right, which is also on the top right on this slide as well.
yeah,
And you can clearly see the river, and it's a wide river, like you said. It was 10,000 men needed to correct the course or to repair the river, and you can see it going around Clifford's Tower and the castle. There's clearly a river there, and it's clearly a very important one and a very, you know, very large river, quite broad across. The River Ouse, I think it is Ouse. It flows right the way through York to the coast, I believe. Or maybe I'm thinking of another river, but the point is, there's lots of rivers in that area. And on the top left, you can see the cathedral in the background. There's the river going through that area of England, New York, or within New York, and flowing through the town itself. So as much as Beaumont can be a little bit harebrained at times, you know, I developed a saying years ago. If you're looking for evidence, there's no evidence like what's self-evident. Your eyes, what you see with your own eyes. Sometimes that's all the proof you really need. Which is not to detract anything away you know, um, from the Middle Eastern area, a very important area in the world in terms of world history. I would never deny that. But I'm saying in this particular case, I think Beaumont is really kind of onto it and saying that the more likely candidate for Babylon would be York rather than the one that is supposedly in the Middle East and they don't even know where it is. And very few of the possible locations for Babylon don't even seem to be close to a river.
Yep. Or the tower. Where's the tower? Where do you think the Tower of Babylon was in York?
Clifford's Tower. This one here on the top right. Would be
Really?
a pretty would be a pretty good candidate for it, wouldn't you say?
Nah.
No?
Nah, it was meant to be a spike, again, it was meant to be a very tall, and you never know, maybe part of York Cathedral, maybe that's go, okay, maybe before that was built, that big massive building that imposed, that's the biggest building in York, the one on the bottom right. Maybe that's sitting on a footprint. Like something else that was there before, because all these churches and stuff they build on top of older churches and older sites, and the older churches are usually being built on top of another older church, and then that older church was built on top of a pagan site. Again,
Yep.
it was and usually fine. So you never know, that big hump that it's sitting on might be part of the original tower, and the green mound that tower stands on, that
Yep.
might be something under there again, because it's round as well. Because
That's exactly.
the Tower of Babel was meant to be round.
Mm-hmm. That is
So
exactly what I was thinking. That's exactly, you read my thoughts on that. That's exactly what I thought. As soon as I saw it, that's what I thought.
aye, it's maybe
Yeah.
that's not the tower, but it's maybe sitting in the footprint of the tower, the original.
Well, also notice that it's fortified. If you look on the bottom right-hand side, Clifford's Tower is surrounded by fortifications and walls.
All right, aye.
And on the top right as well, you notice how it's almost looks a little bit elevated.
Mm-hmm.
Everything seems to revolve. It seems to be in the middle. Everything seems to be revolving around it. That's why I thought
Mm-hmm.
Clifford's Tower was a likely candidate, because it seems to be in the middle and everything is built up around it. That's and also the fact that it was on a mound as well.
And Brock's, when you look at the Brock's, the old ancient Brock's from up north, and that makes you wonder if that's how they built the tower, like a Brock,
Mhm.
again, in that style. Because we're talking BC, three
Yeah.
hundred BC. So what were the building techniques back then for buildings? And if these buildings were meant to have been built in Britain, well, we've seen how they can build massive towers out of dry stone. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Up these places, and some of them still exist. Again, that Mosa, the Brock Mosa, it's huge.
Mhm.
It's like 30, 40 feet tall, and just dry stone, and it's got like, and its walls are so thick you can actually walk up them like staircases into like other chambers, and fucking unbelievable. And we get this image at school. Okay, we're told that back in BC times we were living in mud huts. We were kind of running about with like our furs on, like hunting and ooga booga. And that's what it feels like. It feels like
Yeah.
it's like the schools teach you that we're so primitive in the BC times, when really when you see those brocks, you think
Mhm.
fucking you have to be a civilized community that is working on a high level to build these kind of buildings BC, or just after the turn of the millennium.
Yeah.
But like I said, when I think of like ancient Babylonian towers and how they would build them in Britain, I look at those brocks in Scotland, and I think if it's going to look like anything, it's going to probably look like a brock,
Yeah. I
but
know.
maybe a
I
even
mean,
bigger version, kind of like a big Mac, and maybe even a big super brock.
well, like I say, that earlier on today, I was went back to Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth, and I recorded the first part of part 6 presentation. And this is what David Icke is saying: is there was the universal civilization, the golden age, about 10,000 years ago, the fall of Lemuria and Atlantis, Sumer, Babylon, and the Indus Valley were the three great superpowers, basically. So when Beaumont comes along and says some stupid shit like, the Macedonians civilized the natives, what the fuck, no, the Indus Valley, India was part of a global superpower and then became one, and as was Babylon, as was Sumer. This universal civilization, because we did have a universal civilization before the Great Catastrophe and all this sort of thing. So 10,000 years ago, from 10,000 to about 80,000 or 100,000 years ago, we were incredibly civilized. incredibly. We were building superstructures like pyramids and things like that, and probably 95% of them are still undiscovered. Like the Bosnian pyramids, things like that, things that have been lost. I'd say about 98% of all the pyramids on the planet are hidden in plain sight. We only know like 2% of all these golden age structures and things like that. But we'll discover it all in the future. So it kind of indirectly ties into what I was saying earlier with Mars, Atlantis, Hollow Earth. But I think I'm just raving at this point. uh, but yeah, I get what I'm trying to say is, what you're saying about the pictures, rocks and all that, like Mausa
Uh-huh.
or Mesa and things like that. Yeah, there was a very, very advanced civilization back tens to hundreds of thousands of years ago, that built these structures. So yeah, probably wrap it up there. But there is a part two to this, so maybe in a few days, if you want to come back on, we'll do
Aye,
part
mate.
two.
Aye, it'll be a pleasure.
And it's quite different to part one, though it does go. So part two, when we get to that, oh, hang on, press the wrong button there. Hang on. When we get to part two, we go back to this part and what he's saying about all these different areas around Britain and Ireland. We'll go into all that and then we'll unpack all of that when we get to part two, because that's the start of part two. So I kind of left that as the splitting off point between parts one and parts two, because I wanted to kind of split it up and be more kind of discussion based this time around.
Right. I
So,
think we spoke quite a lot the last time as well, but
oh yeah,
um, aye, it was good, man. Right, I'll see you in the
cheers.
next one. Cheers.
No bother. Cheers.